Today's video is part 2 of our dragon half sleeve. Let's get to it. Welcome back to a brand new video, guys. I'm Daggett, this is Daggett Designs, and in today's video we're finishing off our dragon half sleeve. Now if you know you're going to love today's video, make sure you smash that like button and leave a comment down below letting me know what you guys would like to see in the next video. So let's get into today's video by going to the overhead. Alright, welcome back to the table, guys. So we're painting our dragon design today. This was our half sleeve design from last week's video, and we're going to start with our black and grey shading as usual. So we're using Liquitex Carbon Black acrylic ink for this one. That's going to be our painting medium. I've preloaded my palette, so a little bit of talk about that. I've got solid carbon black, I've got a medium grey wash and a light grey wash. So the way that I've done this is I've filled up the well with just plain solid black. This well has 1 drop of solid black and then 10 or 15 drops of water basically halfway through the well. And then this one also has 1 drop of solid carbon black, and then I've just filled the well pretty much to the top with water to dilute that color heap so that we have a really light gray. Now along with this, I've also got 3 different brushes that I'm working with. These are Taklon synthetic brushes. I've got a number 5, a number 6 and a number 8. The number 8 I find particularly helpful for doing large background areas. The number 6 is a nice in-between just for shading, especially doing like you can do larger areas and more detail areas with this brush. It's a really good size. And a number 5 for doing more fine detail work. Along with this, I've also got a glass of water just for rinsing out the brushes and to help with some of the blending as well. Now, if you remember the way that we did the black and grey shading from the koi fish video, we're going to tackle this in a very similar way. So I'm going to go straight in with my number 8 brush, and we're going to go into our lightest grey wash color there. And I'm just going to saturate my brush nice and heavily. And then I'm going to come into all these spaces of bars that run through our design and basically fill those in with our lightest grey wash color there. Now, that looks a little bit dark, so I probably added a little bit too much to my brush, but I could just rinse my brush off a little bit to lighten that tone a little bit and help move around some of that pigment in the water. So you're going to work that around until you're happy with the saturation in that area. And you move on to the next section and you're basically filling in all of your bar segments. Now, obviously there's going to be a lot of other bits of shading that need to be done in the background. We're just filling in the sort of undercoat for these areas that are going to give us like a base value. And then we're going to build up shading on top of it. So this certainly isn't the last part of the shading on your design. This is more like the building blocks or the steps that we have to take to build it up. You could of course go in with solid carbon black and blend it up and across your wind bars here. But I like to do it this way. I think it gives you a cleaner result, a more consistent result as well. And it just lets you, I think it lets you be a little bit more careful as well. Alright, so I've painted the wind bars up to this point, and we're getting to this area where the claw actually cuts through the wind bars there. So the part at the back here will be obscured completely by a wind bar, so that's going to be grayed out, and that will desaturate the colors that we layer over the top of our gray there. But we want this bottom portion of the arm to look like it's coming out from this wind bar. So I'm actually going to drop a little bit of gray at the top of that forearm area. Gently blend that down, not too heavily. Just making sure to get it down to white. And then fill in the area behind that with solid grey there. So that we have this section that's sort of coming out from inside that area there. And that's going to be like a really nice layering effect later on. And then for the section just behind that, where we actually want the arm to be sitting behind our wind bar, you can pretty much just bring grey down over the top of that section of the arm. So I'm just filling in that little section. So now what you can see is it has this really nice look of transparency within our wind bars. So we have solid claw here, or once that's colored, those colors will be nice and vibrant. And that continues up to about this point where it starts to go behind the wind bars. Then there's this solid break of white through there where the wind is sort of rushing through. and the other part of the arm is going to be really desaturated, sitting actually behind a wind bar completely. So that's going to give you a little bit of layer separation and make this thing look a little bit more traditional in that way. Now, once you've got all of your wind bar areas filled in, we can go ahead and start adding some of our light gray tones to the rest of our design. So we're going to come into our swirl clouds, or our swirly wind pattern here. And again, we're just going to go in with a light gray wash to start with. We can layer this up later on. But you're going to start with your lightest grey wash and just come in making the back of this nice and dark. Filling that in with grey and then coming around, following the shape of your swirl here. And I'm going to bring that nearly to the edge, just leaving a little white gap around the edge of my cloud here, or my windy swirl thing. Bringing that around. Now, technique for grey shading the clouds is going to be quite straightforward, but it is a little bit tedious. So I'm going to run through it quickly with you, and then you can go ahead and fill in the rest of your clouds. I'm going to be using my medium brush size for this and just going into my light grey wash, getting a bit of light grey wash on there. And I'll do this little section of clouds for demonstration purposes. But basically, you're going to paint in each individual cloud curve, I guess. Just leaving a little white border around the edge of each cloud. So as it comes to the edge, I'm just leaving a little strip of white there. And you're going to start with this method using your lightest grey wash. Again, a lot of this is going to be layered. I think doing it all in grey though sort of helps determine the value of everything else once you start to lay down your other bits of shading and colour. And it just gets a little bit of ink on the page to start with as well. Sometimes it can be hard to know how dark to go in certain areas, and it can be a little bit tricky to reverse that if you've done something too dark and you're not happy with it. So I always think start light and you can always make it darker in time. So I've just painted in these clouds, leaving a little border of white along each little bump of the cloud there. I'll go ahead and fill in the rest of my clouds in the same manner, and then I'll see you guys in the next part. Now I've got all of the cloud sections filled in along with all of the bars in our light grey. The image is looking really flat now, so we're going to have to start changing up the levels a little bit. But before we start adding any more grey and changing up those levels, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of my light grey wash to this upper section, or the bottom section that goes underneath this upper section of body here. I'm then just going to use a little bit of water to blend that out and across. And this will sit underneath our color layer and help to desaturate it a little bit. And that's going to push that part of the body into the background a little bit further, which makes this come forward a little bit more. So we can create a little bit of balance there and a little bit more of an interesting look at depth there. So we can do the same thing for this other part of the body. Just adding a little bit of gray where they overlap. And then blending that out and down like this. That way we get a nice smooth transition from a shadow that goes out into the nicely sort of brighter colored scales. And if you wanted to, you could even do that for the top section of the body, which is sort of coming out from a wind bar there. So we can have a little bit of gray at the top and just blend that down. This is similar to what we did with our claw over here, is just creating that little bit of extra depth and dimension by adding in a bit of a shadow where it's coming out from our wind bar. And this will help create that depth and a little bit of an illusion of transparency, which is nice. Now we're going to start our second layer of grays now. So we're going to go in with our medium grey wash now, and we're ignoring our wind bars for the time being because we're going to use some black in those. So we're going to start with our medium grey wash. So that is our second darkest sort of grey wash here. And you can of course have as many layers of grey as you'd like. If you want to go darker, you can go ahead and do that also. And we're going to load up our medium sized brush with that one. And I'll actually flip my page around and we're going to start at the bottom end here. This is just so that my hand doesn't smudge our inks as we move across. So we're going to come in to do our clouds here. Now what you're doing basically is applying your medium grey wash a little bit further back than your light grey wash, okay? So it's almost the same as when you leave your white gaps, except now you're going to leave a little gap of light grey wash before your dark or medium grey wash actually starts. So you're going to leave that little gap and then work your way up and around everything else. When you get to areas like this where it intersects, if you want to, you can just blend that through. And because we've already got a nice foundation of light grey wash there, it'll actually blend through really easily and smoothly. So I'm going to come into this next section now with a medium grey wash and paint that in. You're just leaving a little strip of the lighter grey wash around the outer edge of your medium grey wash there. And any areas like this, like I said, you can just blend them through a little bit. And you're basically going to come in and do all of your cloud areas that you want to be darker in that tone. So we've got this part in front of those clouds there. I might leave that as more of a light grey wash. These parts sort of get a little bit darker around here, so I can go ahead in with my medium grey and paint in these areas and leave certain sections of cloud a little bit lighter, especially if it's interacting with the background element. So to try and explain how I build the contrast here, you've got a really light area here of sort of detail with the scales and everything in the body, and that's going to be quite detailed and colored. So I like to have a little bit more of a flat background behind that. Behind this, it's going to get a little bit darker because we're stepping down in layers. This section of the body is a little bit darker because we did that little bit of light grey wash over it as it's going back into the wind bars there. So the section of cloud behind this part of the body needs to be a little bit darker to help push it forward because this part of the body is darker. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, a little bit of, rambling there, but I do hope that that makes sense, that I'm darkening up areas to help push other areas forward and create contrast. And you don't need to use your medium or your darker grey wash in every area of cloud because you actually don't want it to be too dark in certain areas. So I sort of build up like that. And now I'm coming out into this lighter area and I'm actually blending my medium grey wash out a little bit. So it's still present, but it blends through smoothly into the lighter areas. And you can see how that starts to layer our clouds and push these clouds back in relation to the clouds at the front here. So you're going to go ahead basically and fill in all of your cloud areas, doing a second coat, and you're using your medium to dark grey wash and doing basically that same technique of just leaving a little strip around the edge of your medium grey wash using your light grey wash there. So now that you've filled in all the areas of your cloud with your darker grey wash there, you can start to see that this sort of pushes things forward a little bit and creates a little bit more depth in your background there. So now we're going to go in and start filling in some of our wind bars in this same sort of way. Now you can either use black or medium grey wash and layer it up. It depends how you want to do it. So for our swirls and for our wind bars, I'm going to go in with solid black. I'll switch over to my blending brush and my inking brush here. My inking brush being the smallest brush we have. I'm going to go ahead and go into my solid carbon black. Now from there, I'm going to basically paint in the bottom section of this bar here with solid black. And I'm going to carefully work my way across the bar. Now when I get to a little bit over halfway, I'm going to start to transition to the shape of the end of the bar there, so we have like a curve at the end. Then you can take your blending brush and feather out that edge as smoothly as you can, and then blend that across into your light grey, just like that. Like this. You want to go a little bit more than halfway for sure. Then you can blend that out or feather it out and just gently blend that across into your light grey. You want that black to sort of smoothly transition into your light grey to the point where it becomes your light grey eventually. So it actually starts as black and it moves through the ranges of your medium greys down to your light grey there. And this is what's going to give you those really nice dark bars in the background. Now for larger areas like this, that's going to be a little bit more challenging to do using such a small brush. So you can switch over to your larger brush for those areas if you'd like to. So I'm going to just rinse out my inking brush And now I'm going to switch over to my number 6 to do my blacks. So load up the brush nice and heavily. And I'll start at the base of this bar here, which runs along the edge of my lightning bolt, so you just want to be careful. And then I can bring that black up to about, like I said, 2/3 of the way up. And from there you want to start to follow the shape of your wind bar. Just bringing it around and curving the end off like that. Once you reach that point, you can swap over to your largest blending brush here. Get some moisture on there and feather out that edge. And then just try to blend that across nice and smooth. Now I think a really important thing to note here is nice, long, even strokes. You're gonna try not to sketch in your shading. Try to have nice, long, even strokes. When you feather an edge out, make sure you have enough moisture so that you can feather the entire edge of that black section. That way you get a nice, even blend across. There's going to be some inconsistencies and imperfections, but this is a painting and that is normal. I don't worry too much about making small mistakes like that. But you know, you do still want to try and get this as perfect as you can. That's sort of part of creating art, is trying to, you know, always striving to improve yourself. So, you know, don't be too hard on yourself if you make mistakes, but always trying to improve what you're doing. Now, it's also important to try and make sure you're laying down an even layer of black ink across the entire bar. That way, when you do your blend, certain areas don't come out more than others, or don't feather out more than others. The best way to do that is just to regularly make sure your brush has enough ink on it. And you can also tell by the sheen on the paper how much ink is there, whether there's too much or not enough. So we're blending that up, nice long even strokes, and blending that up into our light grey there. Alright, now when you reach this portion of the arm where we've got that little bit of background transparency happening, what you can do is add a very small line of black at the very bottom of that bar where the arm sort of cuts into, and then just blend that up the same way you were the rest of it, and just gently blend that up into your medium grey there, and blending that out. That way you still get that nice transparency look. You can still see part of the arm, but now as you can see, it starts to really disappear behind that wind bar and then emerge out the front section there. Now to me, it looks like there's a little bit too much of a breakup going on there, so I'll just take a little bit more light grey wash and bring that across the top section of the forearm here, and gently blending that down. That adds a little bit more continuity there, but it still looks like this part is pushed into part of our background. It's sitting behind some of our wind bars and then coming through to the front. Now, once all of your wind bars are filled in with your black and blended across, we're going to start working on our 2 wind swirls here. Now, this is going to be a little bit tricky. This is, you know, part of the design that's not always super smooth and easy to do, but basically you're going to take solid carbon black, the same way we've been doing our wind bars, and you're going to load your brush up pretty heavily and work from the center of your spiral here where you started your lightest grey wash, and we can make that solid black on that edge there, and you're going to work that around following the shape of your spiral here, and that's going to taper off and down into your center like that. Really quite difficult to explain, and also difficult to do because you want to have like a nice consistent block of black that goes around like that. Now from here, I would take my blending brush, and you're not going to be able to do it sort of all in one go completely, but you can try to get it as smooth as you can, working around your swirl pattern and bringing that darker grey up now from your center area, which is black, and just smoothing that out, trying to blend it into your light grey. It will end up being a little bit darker, but that's okay. You can always add more light grey if you want to, but just blending that around the outside edge of your swirl there. Now, like I said, this is kind of difficult to do and difficult to explain while doing it, but that's the basic sort of way that I do it. You can bring a little bit of black up around the top of your swirl now, like this. Just being careful of your clouds there. Trying to get that nice and smooth on that edge there. And then I'll come in on a different angle. And I'm going to try and just blend that out in a circular fashion. Up and out into my light grey. So that little top section there was a little bit easier. And now you can see there's some pretty heavy inconsistencies in my bottom section there. And that's just because you've got to do it in a swirl like that. And so you'll get inconsistencies in your greys. You can go in with a medium grey wash if you'd like to. And just try to patch it up a little bit. Just try to work that medium grey wash around your spiral a little bit. Once it dries, it hopefully will blend with the areas of carbon black shading. Now, if you followed all of the steps up until this point, you'll have a complete background. And I think there's quite a bit of depth to this background, and it has a nice amount of bits of transparency and sort of layers working together to create this illustration. Now we're going to go ahead and start black shading our dragon. Now, to start off with, I'm going to rotate my page a little bit just to get a better angle. And I'm going to start my black shading with our head here. So I'm going to come in with my inking brush and a little bit of my carbon black, not too much. And I'm going to do a little bit of a line of my black just above the top of the head here. And you want to make sure to leave a nice white ridge at the very top of the head, just a gap of white at the top there. You've heard me talk about this in a lot of videos, so that shouldn't come as any surprise. But we're just leaving a little white ridge at the very top. That's all the black that we're doing there. Come in with your blending brush from here. You can feather that out. And then blend that down onto the top and the front part of the head there. Just gently blending that out as you go down. This is to add a little bit of shadow to the back of our head here. Now, another area you might like to add a little bit of black is on the inside of our mouth where our tongue is. You can add just a little bit of black to the back of the mouth. And gently blend that forward into the front more section of the mouth there. Now, another little section, I'm actually going to come in with dark grey wash here and just go in front of our eye, the back of the nose there. And then take some water and gently just blend that out and forward and around the underside of the cheek here. Now, I don't like to put too much shading in the face unless I'm doing a black and grey design, so that will pretty much be it for shading on our face. For doing our horns, I just want to use my darker grey wash here and pretty much just come into all the little ridges on the horns, following along with a little bit of the dark grey wash there. And you're not going to go crazy with blending anything out here. We're just adding in a little bit of our dark grey wash to some of those little ridge areas to add some texture. And this will sort of mute some of the color in the horns towards the back there. Alright, coming back to our inking brush, we're going to start painting in the scales. So going into your solid carbon black, we're going to paint these scales in the same way that we did our koi fish scales. This is just the way that I like to do them, and I pretty much always do them this way. And that is basically painting in the top row, maybe the top 2 row, with dark or solid black, I should say. And just leaving white around the edges of your scales. Now, this top row actually backs up onto your spine, and as you can see, I didn't add a distinction line between the spine and the scales there. That was intentional. It's to give it a slightly different look to how I would normally do it, and that was just to, you know, try and break things up a little bit, make it look different. So I'm not adding a solid black line with a marker or anything like that. You're just going to blend your scales up a little bit onto the spine there by making the edges a little bit rough. Now, the most important thing to remember here is to have patience when you're doing these scales. Because you're leaving that little white gap, it takes a significant longer amount of time to actually paint these scales than it does to just, you know, do a nice wash over the top of them, like a big color wash or something like that. However, the final result I find is a lot nicer and looks a lot more traditional. This is the way that scales would traditionally be painted and traditionally be tattooed, is with a nice little gap around each of the scales. This helps break up the body a little bit, so it's not just a big clump of color, and I think it looks really nice. It gives it that traditional aesthetic. Now, once you've colored in your top row of scales with solid carbon black, you're going to wash your inking brush out and go into your medium gray wash or your darker gray wash. And you're going to go ahead and now paint in the next row of scales using that darker gray wash. So like I said, you can see that this is indeed a time-consuming process. And it is difficult because you want to make sure you're leaving those little white gaps. But you're basically going to come in with your darker gray wash now and paint in the next row of scales. So if you haven't noticed already, this can be a similar process to doing your backgrounds. Sort of doing them in reverse, however. So going from dark to light with your blending here. And this is to help build up the different layers of levels here. So when we lay our color over the top of our shading, you will actually be desaturating your colors as they get darker. And as we go down the body of scales, that color will get a little bit lighter as you come down the body. So going through the rest of your body and doing the medium gray scales. Now, once you've done all of your gray scales on both sections of the body, it's time now to transfer over to color. This is all of our black and gray shading finished. Now, I've preloaded my palette here and we are using Liquitex acrylic inks again. We're using a sap green, which I've filled my well up and then put a couple of drops of yellow orange azo or golden yellow into it. I have a transparent raw umber, a pyro red, and just plain yellow orange azo or golden yellow. So that's a mix of the green and the golden yellow. So we're going to start with our sap green, and we're basically going to turn our page to get a bit of a better angle on our head here and start by painting this area here. So to start off, I'm taking some of my sap green mixed with yellow orange azo, and I'm coming down from the top of the head, just going straight over the top of my black and grey shading at the top of the head there. That way it still looks green, but the grey shading underneath it will actually help desaturate the colour a little bit. Down about halfway on the head there, and then I can just blend that out and down. Coming around to the back underside of the horn here with a little bit of our green, and you're going to fill in this area fairly solid green because it's sort of a little bit shadowed. It's at the back of the head here, behind the back of the eye, and coming down onto the face a little bit. Now, in terms of leaving gaps, you know, flesh gaps or skin gaps, you're pretty much going to leave them wherever you've got solid lines. So I'm going to leave it underneath the eye here. I'll leave a little white gap because we've got a nice solid line to work underneath that eye. And the same will go for that line above the cheek there. Same with the front ridge of the nose. So I'll come in from behind the front of the eye here, and I'll leave a white gap along the top ridge of my nose there, like that. From here you can take your blending brush and just soften that out, blending down and into your whisker there. For the top ridge of the nose, we're doing the same thing we did at the top of the head. Basically coming in with solid green, leaving a little white gap along the top ridge of our nose there, the bridge of our nose, like this. And then as we get into the main section of the nose, you can take your blending brush and blend that out and down into a nice light sort of green color, just working around those edges, leaving little gaps of white. Now coming in to do the little sections above the eye or the eyebrow ridge there, we can leave a little skin gap or skin break, whatever you want to call it, around the front of that little eyebrow ridge. And then gently blend that green back, and you don't want to go into your eyebrows there too much because we're going to do yellow in those areas, so just blending through gently. Coming in to do the top of our ear, I want to leave a little white gap at the very top of my ear shape there, filling out a little bit more solid green towards the middle. And then with my blending brush, just blending that down. The purpose of blending it down is to basically get a lighter tone so that you have these different shades of green running through your design, as opposed to having just a big solid block of green that wouldn't look so nice. You know, it doesn't have much shading to it. This will help break things up. So along the top of the cheek here, I'm leaving a little gap of white as well, coming across the top of the cheek and forward to the underside of our whisker there. And again, you want that to be solid green on the underside of your whisker. And then you can blend that down and leave a solid white gap around the mouth as well, a little bit like this. Now I like to have a little bit of green separating my beard from the face here, so just coming in the underside of my lip here, working around the teeth carefully like that. And then you can blend that down and just make sure to leave enough space for your actual beard hairs at the bottom there to sit. So blending that down and then carefully sort of pushing it back to white so that we don't go too far down. Now once you've done your face with your sap green mix there, we're going to go ahead and jump back into doing our lovely tedious scales. So basically going over the top of your dark grey scales using your sap green here, and you're going to take it right to the edge of your dark grey. So you're not trying to leave any dark grey visible, you're taking it right to the edge. And like I said, this will desaturate your green and make it look really dark. Now once you've done all of the green scales on top of your grey scales, so in other words your desaturated scales, you're now going to complete the rest of the scales on the body, every single one of them, using just plain sap green mix, the plain sap green that we've got there, and that'll be the same tone as the front of your nose because we're layering that just on top of white. So you'll have this nice transition from black, or really dark green is what it should look like, through to like a darker green, a mid green, and then to our lightest sort of green tone for the remainder of the scales. Now just while you're doing those scales, you can go ahead and paint the scales in that are on your arm and claw there by basically leaving your skin gaps around the edge of each scale the same way that you did in the body. Once you've gone ahead and filled in the rest of your scales as well as the scales on your arm using your sap green mix, we're going to wash our brush out and go into some Pyrrole Red. Okay, first couple of things we're going to look at doing with our Pyrrole Red is the inside of our mouth, the tongue area. So just coming in with solid Pyrrole Red for the tongue, and I'm leaving a little gap on the very top edge of each section of the tongue. So basically splitting it up line by line for the tongue and just leaving a little gap of white along the top edge of each section. Same goes for the front end of the tongue here, leaving a little gap for the middle and for the outer edge there. And same goes for the outside, leaving a gap on that outer edge. So that's it for how to do the tongue. We'll also be using a little bit of our Pyrrole Red in the eyes. I like to come around the back of the eyes with a little bit of red, just a line like that. And then take a blending brush and blend that red forward towards the center of the eye, maintaining that sort of rounded shape. And you can come in from the back of the other eye with a little bit of Pyrrole Red and blend that forward just the same. Now I'm going to use a little bit of Pyrrole Red in the ear as well to sort of emulate a pink color. So just bringing a little bit of Pyrrole Red up through the base of the ear here. And then you can take your blending brush and just softly blend that red out into like a pink and eventually out into white as you reach the end of your ear there. And now we're going to be using that same technique we just used to make our pink on the forearm here. So actually what I'm going to do is come in from the darkest section of our forearm going into our wind bar with a bit of my red. And then I'll blend that up into a pink and just leave a little white gap, or in this case a grey gap, along the edge of our arm there. And you're going to use that same technique coming down the length of your arm, just adding in a bit of red towards the base there where the scales are. And then blending that out into a pink and just narrowly avoiding that edge. Now, of course, the same technique can be used for the inside sort of flesh portions of each of your fingers as well. Now, that's all your blended areas of Pyro Red. We're also going to be using this red for the belly scales. Now, the way that you're going to do the belly scales or the belly plating is basically a very similar way to how you did your main scales, in that you're going to bring red out as your main color, solid, and leave a white gap around your belly scales like that. And you're basically going to go along and paint each of these in the same manner, so that one edge is solid red and then it goes around with a white gap around the border. And you're going to do that for all of the belly scales coming down your body. Now, once you've finished your belly scales using that Pyro Red color, the last thing we're going to use it for is the top of our lightning bolt there. We're going to have a nice red, orange to yellow fade. So just coming in solid red at the top of your lightning bolt here. And just bring that color down. Now, once you reach down to the desired area where you'd like it to start transitioning, you can go ahead and take your blending brush and just start to blend that red down all the way through from red to pink and pink to white here. We're going to come back into it with some of our yellow orange azo a bit later on. So at this point, I'm just washing my brush out, both of my brushes, and we've done all of the red that we're going to use for this one. We're going to go in and do our yellow, our golden yellow parts of it now. So first up is the head. So once again, I'm just going to turn my page for clarity's sake. And we're coming in and doing all the areas of spikes and beard areas with our golden yellow or our yellow orange azo. I'm just using those to paint in all of our beard texturing here. There's no real specific technique to it. Basically just coming into each one of these little spikes or these little peaks and painting it in with your golden yellow. I like to leave a little bit of white between the actual little spikes and the green that we did for the face there. And then what you can do is take your blending brush and soften that yellow as you get towards the green. That way it's not such a harsh transition between colors. And this is especially important when you're doing colors that don't necessarily blend well together. So, in this case, our sap green has yellow in it that we added into it. So it'll blend through pretty much seamlessly. But, certain colors won't blend through that smoothly, and you'll need to soften the edges with your blending brush, which I like to do regardless. Okay, we're also going to take our golden yellow and come in to do the spine of our dragon here. Now, there's no blending or shading involved, just solid orange yellow through the spine here. If you wanted to, you could go in and do different shading and lighten certain parts of it. But because of how much is going on, I want to keep the spine of our dragon quite simple. So just solid yellow color throughout. And this will help create a line that you can follow with your eye when looking at the design, making the body a little bit easier to read. You're also going to take a bit of your golden yellow for the lightning bolt. We're going to finish that off. Just coming in from where we started our red blending. You can see that layering that on top makes it orange. And then from orange, we can come through to just solid orange yellow, painting in our lightning bolt color. And then coming towards the bottom of your lightning bolt, I would just take the blending brush and gently blend that yellow down to white, just slowly making it get lighter and lighter as you get towards the bottom there. Okay, the very last thing you're going to do is go into your transparent raw umber and do your horns. It's going to be like a brown sort of color. So just coming into the base of your horns with it like this. And then you can take your blending brush if you'd like and just blend that color up to a lighter shade. Coming in from the other side with a little bit of this color as well. And I'll gently blend that up as well. And you're going to do that for both of your horns, just starting at the bottom with your darker color of the raw umber and blending it up. This will give you a nice transition shade from like a darker brown up through to a nice light bone color. Now I've gone ahead and added my stamp, and that is it for this design. And along with that, that is it for this week's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I think we ended up with a really nice dragon half sleeve design. It's got some beautiful, vibrant colors, and it maintains that traditional aesthetic. For those of you that requested this design, I really hope you enjoyed today's video and got a lot out of it. And for the rest of you, I also hope you learned something and enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a comment down below letting me know what topics you'd like to see covered in future videos. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. If you like the content that I make and you'd like to support the channel, make sure you smash that like button. And hey, while you're at it, check out one of these other great videos.